Some of you may know of the Pacific island called Easter Island that is located just off the coast of Chile and is renowned for its huge stone statues called moai, of which there are now 887 which have been counted on that island. Now, for a long time, historians have been mystified by how these statues were actually transported and erected, because they estimate that each statue would have taken at least 500 men and over 40 logs for them to be erected. Now, what is baffling is that this island, the Easter Island, doesn't have any trees. And the mystery was finally solved when archaeologists discovered traces of forests that had once existed on the island. And scholars now conclude that the inhabitants of Easter Island got so obsessed with building these moai, each generation trying to outdo the previous generation in the number of moai that they were able to erect and construct, that they ended up clearing all the forests and depleting the whole island's supply of trees, which then sent the island into an ecological collapse that severely curtailed the population that the island could support. This is the story, I think, the same metaphor that we are given in the book of Genesis with the story of the flood, the tail end of which we hear in our first reading today. The basic thrust of this story of the flood is that if we don't obey God's laws and respect nature, nature, which should be our friend, which God has created to sustain us, ends up becoming our enemy and wiping us off the face of the planet. Now, this is a very real threat, as we well know today from countless scientific studies that tell us that our own human activity, especially our burning of greenhouse gases, is leading to climate change and is rendering climate natural disasters such as cyclones, which cause flooding, far more frequent and far more intense in their nature. Countless studies are revealing that we are literally on the tipping point of ecological disaster and collapse, where our whole system are out of kilter and nature is threatening to lose its ability to support us. Now, the reading that we see today contains a promise from God that never again will He let nature destroy us and take us off the face of the earth. Now, I think that this is tremendous good news, because science as well reveals to us that nature's ecological systems have an amazing ability to regenerate and rebound after we have exhausted them and driven them to the point of collapse. So God is fighting in the corner of nature. God is fighting on our side. But we as human beings are fighting against God, if you like, fighting against nature and pushing it to the very brink. God is doing all in God's power to ensure that we do not take nature over the edge. And this is the promise of the rainbow, that God is fighting for nature, fighting for our survival, but we are our own worst enemies. The readings also contain for us a solution, because there's a stark contrast between two weather systems and two landscapes. On the one hand, we have a flood, an excess of water, representing an excess of life, symbolically representing what happens when we get drunk on life, when we get carried away and try to exploit nature far too much. But on the other hand, there's the stark contrast of where Jesus goes, into the desert, a landscape characterized by an absence of water, by a scarcity of life because of the absence of water. And I think that the whole point of Lent is to enter into the desert, to enter into this experience of an absence of life. Our ancestors knew this alternation between flood and desert. They knew that nature was built in with systems of boom and bust, with times of abundance and times of scarcity, with winters and summers. And this taught them that through the times of scarcity, they were able to endure them so that they might appreciate the times of abundance ever the more. Indeed, the word Lent comes from an ancient English word meaning springtime, because springtime hunger and springtime fasting were a complete necessity in medieval Europe, imagine a village where the marketplace is dwindling on its winter stores that have been kept over from the last harvest, still waiting for the next harvest to come. If everyone decided to be a glutton and use their money to buy up all the stores at the marketplace, people would go hungry. And so if everyone was to eat, everyone had to exercise restraint. Springtime hunger and springtime fasting were a fact of life and were incarnated in the experience of Lent, this experience of the desert. You see, when you take time to be hungry and empty, you allow God to fill you up and ensure that God is the one who is filling you up and giving you sustenance. But you also allow for space for celebration, so that if you live on 50% during Lent, when it comes to Easter, you can go up to 100%. But in our modern days, I think we're used to being always in a constant state of satiety, at a constant 100%. So that when it comes to celebration, we actually end up going overboard, over 100%, because we need to mark it as different from normal. Our normal shouldn't be 100%. That's what Lent teaches us. In order to be balanced, we need to come down to 50% during Lent. We need to come down to a time of want, a time of scarcity, so that we can appreciate more the time of abundance and not end up taxing our ecosystem far too much, which is what we're doing with our global supply chains that have in many ways ensured us the ability to live in a continual state of abundance, to eat vegetables and fruits in season and out of season. Because with our global supply chains, we can always ensure that there are pineapples growing somewhere and strawberries growing somewhere, so that we can eat them, these fruits of plenty and of abundance, all through the year. I think we need to learn this Lent what it is to do without, to go without in some way or another, so that we can preserve our planet, so that we can walk lightly and allow our planet to regenerate, and allow God to teach us with this fundamental pedagogy that God has put into nature, teaching us to go without during some times, so that we may better appreciate the times of abundance, the fullness of life that God wants to give us. After the example of Jesus, let us then venture into the desert, so that we may have a better balance of our lives, so that we may not be like the people of Easter Island, who foolishly exhaust all their supplies, but live in a constant state of dependence on Mother Nature and dependence on God. God bless you and have a good day.